Welcome to the wonderful world of Gabagool. And this is Saint Gabagool himself, JR. What's going on today? Well, the video I'm presenting today is, frankly speaking, it's really long. As it turns out, my original idea for this one was a lot shorter and was meant to be more of an interlude. But as production of this video dragged on, as the script got longer, I reasoned to turn this into a proper video. I'll get into that in a little more detail later. After the video I did on Manhunt, I figured I'd get a hold of the sequel since I stated in the video that I'd do a video on it eventually. While downloading my copy I got from an abandonware site, I decided to go through the site to see what else they had to offer, as they had fuckloads of things. I didn't even know most of the titles I came across, but a fair bit caught my eye. Of course, I came across some that I had heard of and had even played before. During my search, I came upon a game that I have a long history with and have played a little too much in the past. It was something I wanted to do a video on at some point in time anyway, and circumstances in my real life kind of forced my hand to do it now. Today I'm talking about Spider-Man 3. Oh boy, it's a movie game too. This is going to be a hell of a journey, so I advise that you get comfortable. Hopefully this journey will be fun for you guys, since it likely won't be the most fun for me. Oh well, onward! For a bit of background, back in the early 2000s, superhero/comic book movies were just starting to see widespread appeal. One of those IPs that were responsible for making that happen was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. You know, Sam Raimi, the director behind the acclaimed Evil Dead movies, of which he directed the first 3 movies. That kickstarted a franchise that I personally wish would die already. Also, I feel I should mention that Raimi himself can't keep getting away with it. If you're confused by that last line, then I won't help you out there. Sorry, back on track. I was one of the many people to get hooked on these Spider-Man films, as I was young and dumb. The awesome powers of this hero blew my mind out of the water. These days, I still have nostalgia for these films, as many people do, although I can't say any of them are masterpieces and have plenty of problems across all 3 movies. In my old age, I find myself not really holding any interest in comic book movies generally, as most just bore and annoy me, especially Marvel ones. Despite that, I will always have a soft spot for the early Spider-Man films and the character in general. And yes, I'm one of the few people in this universe who actually likes the 3rd entry. Sure, it's not high art or anything, but it's entertaining, which is what matters to me. Even then, it's not the worst possible film out there. I mean, come on, have you seen Food Fight? Of course, seeing as these movies were smash hits, plenty of merch and supplementary pieces of media were made to tie into said movies. Specifically, all 3 films received tie-in games. Most people seem to recall the game for the 2nd movie, understandably enough. Matter of fact, here's my rundown of the first 2 games. First one, not terrible. It looks good for 2002, but it's clunky to play. It's not free roam like most games that'd come after it, not just the movie ones. The stealth sections kill it for me though, causing me to hold a bit of a hatred for the game. You get to properly play as the Green Goblin though, so that's a plus. Second one looks kinda like shit, particularly most NPCs and the basic look of just the environment. It's short, ridiculously repetitive, and hardly replayable. However, I have replayed it about a dozen times throughout the years out of boredom. The ragdoll physics in this game are top notch, with the overall dumbass gameplay being so wonky that it's amazing. Not a terrific game by any stretch of the imagination, but good enough to be memorable. It helps that it has forever been immortalized thanks to the pizza theme. Now, the 3rd one. This one I remember wanting to get a copy of back when it came out. I didn't have one of the fancy new 7th gen consoles at the time, so I ended up getting a copy of it on PS2. Real quick, games that came out on 2 opposing generations of consoles around this time were kinda weird, and Spider-Man 3 was certainly no exception. I get that the specs were going to be better on something brand spankin' new like PS3 or Xbox 360. Therefore, there were going to be some big differences than what you'd see on something old like the PS2. But in quite a few cases, the differences were big enough to make the two versions feel like completely separate games, and this game is kinda like that. Usually, this only happens because different versions are developed by different companies, a fact that was lost on me as a child. I'll touch on the PS2 version when necessary, plus here on in, when I talk about the PS2 version, it refers to this version of the game which was also released on the Wii and PSP as well. And as for the PC version, it also refers to the Xbox 360 and PS3 release of the game, just as a future note. Now where do I come in? Little kid me was ecstatic for another Spider-Man movie in mid-2007, which brought about me getting my hands on merchandise for said movie, including the game obviously. As previously mentioned, I only had a PS2 at the time, and that was the only version I was able to play at that point. It wouldn't be until a few years later that I got my dad to buy me a copy for PC, although it didn't run well on any computers I had immediate access to. I distinctly remember trying to play it while my frame rate was utter asswash, with mouse and keyboard no less, but I'll get to that latter point later on. Even if I had known of tweaking graphics options at that time, I still feel like the game would have run like garbage. I tried and tried to push through the game despite the constant lag, but eventually I saw that I wasn't winning this battle. So that prospect was put aside for the time being. Fast forward another few years later when my family got a PS3, with months after that leading me to buy a copy of the game on the system, giving me a chance at long last to get through the damn game. Or this version anyway. Staggering back and forth for another few years, I'd finally buckle down and get through the game, with much difficulty. It wasn't until 2017 when I'd get the upper hand on this version of the game and claim victory. Barely. I would have completed it much earlier, except my first copy on PS3 shit the bed, resulting in my save file getting corrupted and pissing me off in one fell swoop. On top of that, after obtaining another PS3 copy later, I found that the game's difficulty is kind of a mean prick. Another thing I'll touch on further later. All these factors kept me from getting through the game relatively fast. Frankly, I feel like it was dumb luck and a pinch of desperation that got me through it. And this is where we're at in the present day, or rather present day as of the release of this video. I've played through this version of this dumbass game for the third, and later, fourth, time in my life. Just for this video. Just for you guys. Alright, enough of that. Time to get to the meat and potatoes of this game. This game plays kinda like what you'd expect. It's a beat 'em up. You kick the ass of whoever dares get in your way. On top of that, you're the motherfucking amazing Spider-Man. So you can swing from webs and climb up walls, as Bruce Campbell tells you so in the tutorial on the PS2 version.
What would Spider-Man be without his spider powers? I'll tell you, he'd be Man. Is that what you came here to play? Man 3? I don't think so. Now go ahead and crawl up this wall, you know, like Spider-Man.
Ah, Ash Williams himself doing voice work as a narrator once again, as he did the same for the previous two movie games, and even returned for the Amazing Spider-Man movie game? Huh, that's odd. He wasn't involved with anything else Spider-Man related after the Raimi movies, so that strikes me as a little weird. Well, I suppose he's done weirder roles. He was Elvis in that one movie where he's trying to stop this demon that has the ability to suck a person's soul straight out of their asshole. I shit you not. Let's back up for a second. Did I say tutorial? Yeah, start here. The game begins with a building being bombed by a cartoon villain and his cartoon goons, which catches the attention of the web-headed dick. We're forced into combat upon entry to the building, being taken step by step of how to fight. Yes, this game has a forced tutorial, because there is no God, and if there is, he hates every single one of us. The last two installments had no such thing. One had a separate level altogether, and two starts you in the tutorial, but immediately gives you the option to skip it. If you say so, I guess we're toughing out the tutorial once again. The fighting in this game is all over the place and kind of bombastic, not helped by the fact that beat-em-ups and fighting games in general aren't my thing normally. Which means loads of button mashing because of my lack of skill. We keep getting held back by these damn tutorials. Piss off, will ya? I just want to beat the shit out of these guys. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying tutorials in general are bad. It can be helpful even in games that are very easy to play. It's forcing me to play through them and stop the game in its tracks that really gets under my skin. Moving along, we have QuickTime events. I don't come across those often, but it's worth a talking point for sure. In the PC version, QTEs are unreasonably fickle. What I mean by this is that half the time, the game is too impatient to wait 0.01 of a millisecond for you to respond to the button prompt on the screen and kills you, starting the event over again. If you fail too many times, the game will just straight up kill you and throw you back to the last checkpoint. Actually, no, I'll come back to this later. I've got more to say, but it'll become more relevant later. Just you wait. During the tutorial, we learn how to use spider reflexes. What's that? I feel another tirade coming. And now, spider reflexes are one of your couple of lifelines in this game. On the PC anyway. It allows you to dodge incoming attacks and counterattack when given the chance. At least that's what the purpose of it is, which is rather problematic. That is all because you have to hold down the button whenever you need to dodge, and this obviously drains the reflex meter. The problem with it is that you don't always know when your enemy will attack. Now wait just a tick, you jerk off. You can clearly see when the enemy is about to attack, represented by a fist icon that appears above their fucking head. Amateur. Why, yes, thank you very much, Mirror JR. You are indeed correct. However, those icons sometimes kind of pop up whenever they want. Hell, sometimes the goon will just stand there or dance around you before deciding to attack. Yeah, of course this game has fucking shit AI. So you're sitting there, right, waiting for your opponent to strike, draining the reflex meter. In no time, that meter is empty and every enemy in the room finally decides to do something. I didn't have that as much in this playthrough, but there was still pain to be had from that crap plenty of times over. I mean, come on, the previous game had a dedicated button for dodging, and the spider reflexes were there as a sort of power-up. It slows down time and causes your attacks to become more damaging, on top of using fighting moves not seen outside this mode. The fact that dodging wasn't automatic in that game made it smoother to play. Even the PS2 version has a dedicated button for dodging. Welp, back to the old grind. Finally, once we trudge through that bastard of a tutorial level, we get an intro, with Tobey Maguire narrating in his boring-ass tone of voice. The same one we heard in the previous two games. New gangs have emerged in the city, which consists of The Apocalypse, a punk street gang seen straight out of a cheesy 80s action flick. But I approve, as punk-related things tend to have a charm to them if they don't straight up kick ass. Next is the Order of the Dragon Tail, or just simply Dragon Tail, not to be confused with the old kids' cartoon Dragon Tales. Finally, there's Arsenic Candy, a girl gang consisting of emo and goth girls dressed in black dresses and commonly wielding weaponized umbrellas, throwing knives, and teddy bear grenades. Yeah, if it really tickles your fancy, they do seem to predate the emergence of e-girls. We also get exposition about how in the few months after dealing with Doc Ock, there haven't been any major villains. But of course, they're coming. MJ is now Peter's girlfriend, Harry hates Peter, and overall Peter's life seems to be looking up. After that intro, guess what we're treated to next? Yes, more tutorial shit. Specifically, now that we're out in the city, we learn how to web swing. The game straight up makes fun of you by reminding you that if your web can't attach to a building, the player will just shoot out a small spurt of web before plummeting. This is a common occurrence throughout the game, which is just plain dickish. It doesn't take an expert to see that we're not off to a good start. Tossing aside how crap the mechanics are, the camera is incredibly jerky, and you got textures flickering and shimmering all over the place. This is what this video has been building up to. This right here. This game is shit, if you already couldn't tell from what you've seen and heard to this point. It's mostly ugly to look at, and it's crap to play, pretty much no matter what system you play it on. I fought an uphill battle trying to get the PS2 copy working, and it wasn't the emulator's fault either. This game is just that goddamn temperamental. After trying so hard, that just wasn't in the cards, so onto a Wii emulator then, which didn't work out either. Aside from some really bad graphics glitches that I couldn't get around, this version was designed to be used with the Wii's move controls, along with the nunchuck. I didn't know how to get that working with an Xbox controller, and I don't have any of the original hardware because fuck that, so that's that. Finally, I could try the PSP copy, but I was very hesitant. Firstly, because the prime emulator for the platform, PPSSPP, that's a really stupid name by the way, has a paid version that is probably better than the free version. Admittedly, I haven't tested both forms, but I didn't want to fucking buy an emulator. Secondly, I read up on how the PSP version didn't run well on emulator either, but I kept hitting dead ends, so this was my last chance. After all this time, I suckered myself into getting PPSSPP Gold, as it's called, and trying it that way. And it runs smooth as hell. I'll take it. I'm tired of trying to fight with this game, and it's basically like the PS2 version. Except everything looks like a blurry mess, all the icons are way bigger, and character models particularly are reduced in variation. I'm assuming because of the limited specs of the original hardware at the time. Doesn't help that I don't have trigger buttons. I mean, I physically do on my controller, but not in game. This was often a point of confusion for me during gameplay. It makes playing this game even more clunky than it already is. Fuck it, beggars cannot be choosers. But to get back on course, there's an overall point here. I'm not trying to beat around the bush any longer. This is an objectively bad game. It looks and feels like an alpha build at worst, and a beta build at best, almost resembling a game. There are good things to be had with this game, but are vastly overshadowed by the bad. Like, yeah, Spider-Man's model actually looks pretty good. It's fairly high quality, and the front Spider logo, lenses, and overall web pattern actually sticks out on the suit. Unlike previous movie games where it was just simply textured on. I can't complain there, but most other things in this game look like pure ass. The NPCs themselves range from looking decent and mostly human, while some look like they've skinned someone else and are now wearing the skin of said victim. The shadows are clearly pixelated, the buildings look about what you'd expect, and textures of all sorts just flickering constantly. Matter of fact, I'll say it now, if you get motion sickness easily or anything like that, I'd advise minimizing and simply listening to this video. It's not pretty to look at. There's loads and loads of texture flickering and camera jerking at a constant rate. It's bad. None of it made me feel motion sick or just generally ill during playing somehow. Though I'd feel like a dick if I didn't issue some sort of warning. Gee, maybe I should have done it earlier in the video too. Fuck it. This is all the consequence of being a movie game. It has to be rushed in order to come out just in time for the movie, and this is only one of the many examples. As this was still in a time when movie tie-in games were commonplace, and many suffered the same fate. Others did okay, but even then, a vast majority of them get forgotten to time, usually because they're so limited by design in order to keep in line with the movie. You need to give it a gimmick in order to extend its shelf life, like LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga for instance. These days, that game is held close to the heart by many people roughly around my age, as the game has a practically timeless charm to it and it's fun to play. Oh, and these games typically don't have crippling bugs or problems. The LEGO games are still going to this day, with the latest LEGO Star Wars installment, The Skywalker Saga, being a hit with many people. And obviously, LEGO is a huge brand, with a part of that thanks to Star Wars too, another huge brand. That's going to be a winning formula, just speaking from a financial perspective. Put 2 and 2 together and you get money. What does Spider-Man 3 have? It's a game adaptation to a movie that's still hated by many people today, and even in the event that the game was accessible currently, it's a mess of a game. It's another game that was lost to time the moment it hit the market. Granted, a lot of old Spider-Man games are in the same boat as far as accessibility is concerned. Most aren't available to purchase for a reasonable price, and most aren't currently being officially sold for that matter. Before Spider-Man for the PS4, just about all Spider-Man related games have been sidelined to abandonware for some time and still remain that way now, which is a shame. I haven't played any of the games from the 90s, but from the 2000s, there are quite a few genuinely good Spider-Man games, not just the 2018 game. Ultimate Spider-Man and Shattered Dimensions are objectively good games, but both are abandonware too, so I guess we can't win no matter what. Why the hell am I taking time out of my life, and frankly yours, to go over this rather insignificant game then? Well, here's where things get weird. I like this game. At this moment, you may be thinking to yourself, wait, you actually like this putrid pile of garbage that some might call a game? Or you might not be thinking that. I don't know, I can't read minds. Anyway, yes, I do hold some sort of liking for this damn game. That's why this video isn't over just yet. Well, that's not the only reason, but that's not important. I've got more ground to cover. Get comfy if you haven't done so by this time, as we dive further into this bastard child of a game. I'm just getting warmed up. I keep bringing up the fact that this game is a movie tie-in, so it does have a story, not just the one adapted from the movie. According to the back of the box, it has 10 storylines, having you play through multiple ones at a time to get through the game. The PS2 version, however, only has 5, but makes up a little by having an arc exclusive to this version. Ooh, we'll come back to that soon enough. Yeah, the game on PS2 really is just a neutered version of the PC version in many ways, as already observed and will continue to observe from here. Anyhow, as expected, the game loosely follows the story of the movie, only really covering the highlights and parts that would translate the best into a game. Like Peter's struggle with the symbiote. A large chunk of time is taken up showing Peter being conflicted by the power of the black suit and what it's turning him into, while the game kind of bullet points it. Just like the film, it makes Peter more edgy than normal and thinking he's such a cool guy because he has all this power. Although he's a super douche, he's still no Homelander. Sure, his combat skills become substantially more aggressive, but the web fellow is no murderer. Or is he? We'll come back to that. Understandably, a lot of the movie's story is condensed. Like the Flint Marko plot doesn't really delve into him being Uncle Ben's killer. And the conflicts that Peter has with Harry, and later MJ, don't get much playtime here. Hell, Aunt May straight up didn't make the cut. I don't know, maybe she's dead in the game's universe, I would guess. Gotta fill in the gaps with a lot of crap then. The first arc we're exposed to at the beginning is the Mad Bomber arc, or H-Bombers as they're called in the PS2 version. What does the H stand for? Perhaps it stands for Hubert, but we'll never know. From here, it branches off into many different arcs that you can choose to play in any order from here. What we got is a plot line with the apocalypse causing general anarchy and, in a practical sense, terrorism. But we're apparently not going to bring up that particular word, because this is still a kid's game after all. Sort of. They first cause mayhem at the docks by almost drowning some guy. Next they wreak havoc in the subway tunnels, and finally they attempt to destroy a power grid, although we successfully put a stop to that. Following that caper, the Apocalypse boss, a rather beefy looking guy, wants to kick our ass. I own his ass by glitching him right into the water, killing him. You know, this isn't even the first time this has happened either. I never mean to do it, it just happens because this is how the game is. The goth mommies of the arsenic candy decide to disrupt the shop and kidnap some people, holding them in an abandoned theater that kinda looks like the one from the previous game. The one where the player's introduced to supposed alien Mysterio. I don't know, this theater just kind of reminds me of that. Afterwards, they destroy a fireworks factory and, alright, I'm gonna level with you here. The story to a lot of these arcs ultimately don't matter. A lot of it is just pure filler, in all honesty. Fuck, I don't even remember why the factory was decimated by the gang, but there's no way it holds any weight to the later plot points. Anyway, back to the point, we leave the arsenic candy arc for the time being and move on to something else. The Dragon Tale gets an arc too, involving some old man and these statues or something. I don't know, like I said a minute ago, it doesn't matter. The first of their levels starts with trailing a van some goons stole by following the path of statues that drop out of the back of the vehicle. Gee, that's an awful lot of statues. Next one, we've got this old man again, who we now have to protect from more of these Dragon Tail dicks. 3 of the first enemies to appear wield rocket launchers, but even they're no match for superpowers, or some shit like that. A helicopter appears, dropping more of these bastards and trying to gun us down. We rip that gun right out and they try to make their escape. Spidey, with his quick thinking and quick reflexes, makes this huge web in like 10 seconds. Not far from where the helicopter was coming from, mind you. And the chopper gets caught in this web. The day is saved, once again. Their final mission, for now, requires us to protect an armored truck from wave after wave of Dragon Tail goons. Ugh, this level is just plain annoying. Guys will spawn with rocket launchers far from you, and gang cars full of enemies will constantly spawn to try and ram that truck off the road. Eventually the truck will reach a warehouse at the docks, but all enemies that had followed you still need to be taken out, no matter how many followed you all the way to the end location. Bleh, I'm done with this level. We're bailing on this storyline anyway, once again, to focus a bit on the movie story. Making up this section, we're able to give MJ thrill rides. And no, I don't believe that's a euphemism in this case. The objective for these missions, get her to wherever she needs to go and fill up the heart meter on the side through doing certain actions and or collecting these big floating hearts. She stops generating hearts when you're near gang activity of any sorts. You can put her down to fight these guys or just simply get far away enough from them. And of course I always go with the latter choice. Oh, and it's all timed. Sounds like fun, right? Said no one ever. I guess it did to someone actually, as you get to do this 4 times throughout the game. Albeit the last one is a scare ride where you don't have to collect hearts, fortunately. Just pass through all the checkpoints to thankfully make it a bit less painful. Not only are these levels not fun to play, MJ is constantly yelling in your ear. Yeah, throughout the entire level. It got so irritating at one point that I had to turn down the goddamned volume. Fuck these levels just on that alone. But yeah, fuck these levels anyway. You only have to suffer through 2 of these in the PS2 version, but they're less involved gameplay wise, but just as annoying.
Swim really close to the ground.
Wait, that's a thing? I never knew I could splat in the buildings like that. It almost never happens. What the fuck? You can take up assignments photographing various things for the Daily Bugle. These levels are tedious but not horrible. It's a little shitty that all of these levels are required to progress through the story though. That's a little too much tedium for my taste, but I reckon most of this game is filler after all. The first level consists of taking pictures of giant lizards, tying into another arc that we'll get to later. It teaches you how to use your camera, a mechanic you can use at any time while playing, something not seen before in previous games. Granted, it's pretty pointless as you can't save any pictures taken or anything, and there's a scoring system that only matters during some missions. But the sentiment is nice, I guess. The next bunch of photo op levels are unremarkable for the most part. The second to last one involves taking some pics of an actual UFO, a cool concept ruined by how annoying this one is because you gotta photograph this thing moving a few times. And this fucker moves fast too. Might want to fire up the reflexes for this one. And the last level is only unlocked after obtaining the black suit. The level has you taking cameras hidden by Eric Foreman here, as he's trying to catch you making a goof out of yourself due to the suit's influence, but he clearly fails. Now that it's on my mind, or rather when I was writing the script, I wanted to talk about some of the mechanics this game has after bringing it up a little bit ago. For the most part, this is a standard Spider-Man game, as far as gameplay is concerned. It's a free roam, beat 'em up, button mashing until you get some sort of combo. You're a man of the spider variety, so that means you can do such things as crawl on walls and produce webbing, specifically through the means of web swinging and web zipping around the city. You unlock more abilities and combos as you go through the game by performing certain tasks. There's no point system that you can use to manually upgrade your abilities and have to just do things in order to unlock something new. Unless this is the PS2 version, where there is a point system in place, somewhat in the same vein as the one from the previous game. Honestly, just worry the most about upgrading your health and reflexes. Trust me on that one. You'll get plenty of new combos just for, once again, playing the damn game. Particularly, to upgrade the health to the max level, you have to complete story missions and random events during free roam. These random events happen frequently while swinging through the city, usually consisting of hooligans causing a disturbance. The city is divided into zones when it comes to the gangs, all highlighted on the map. I mean the map that you can bring up with the select button. The mini-map is almost useless, only showing blips and no other detail whatsoever. How fucking helpful, though the PS2 copy has a properly detailed radar, so what gives? Anywho, these zones are divided into further sections. Once you've thwarted enough crime in these zones, the zone level will cap and you'll no longer have to complete these events. Although you still can whenever they pop up. And once all zones are done, your max health will be done upgrading. As much as this doesn't sound worth it, trust my word when I say it is. You'll need it later. While we're talking about it, other crap you can do in free roam is races, which is pretty self-explanatory I'd say. There's skydiving challenges, which has you dive through rings while skydiving. Then you've also got bomb and combat tours, game modes where you go from location to location, disarming bombs or beating up goons, respectively. These combat tours replace the random events in the PS2 version, with the bomb tours and skydiving challenges being absent altogether. You can collect various types of tokens, but I'm not sure what collecting all of one type will reward you, if anything at all that is. That's why I never bothered with these. You get collectibles in the PS2 version as well in the form of meteorites and spider emblems. I'm not sure if collecting all the meteorites will reward you with anything outside of points. I remember seeing on a lot of cheat code sites that collecting all of them unlocks the ability to play as Venom. While that sounds awesome, I don't think that's correct, but it still shows that as being a thing on a lot of cheat sites. You know what, here's how you unlock that ability. Play Ultimate Spider-Man. Hell, it's a better game anyway, so you may as well. Oh, and the emblems don't become available to collect until you finish the last mission of the game. And go figure, collecting all those unlock the black suit to use permanently. I've got a pile of crap that I said I'd come back to later on by this point, and I'm adding the black suit mechanic to that pile for the moment. For now, I have a couple more mechanics I gotta cover. Notice that meter that keeps filling up as I kick ass? As one would expect, that's a power-up meter of sorts, loosely similar to the spider reflexes from 2, although it differs depending on the suit the player is currently wearing. While wearing the classic suit, once this meter fills up, you can perform finishing moves with a 2-button combo. These finishing moves help thin the herd when battling crowds of generic goons, and can even work on bosses, sometimes. Yeah, these moves sometimes just don't work because this game is shit. That's all the answer anybody really needs. When the black suit is finally unlocked, initially this meter acts as a rage mode by pressing a certain button rapidly. And once it's activated, if you're on the ground, an animation will play showing Spider here getting a real rager. More importantly, it freezes you in place, leaving you vulnerable to enemy attack. So in my footage, if you see me flipping around like a maniac before it switches on, that's to prevent such a problem. Well, sometimes I still didn't get lucky. As time goes on though, you unlock finishing moves for the black suit as well. As great as they are at cheesing boss battles, it's still made impractical by the fact that you have to switch on rage mode before you engage the finishing move. Oh, and this meter is sort of in the PS2 version? What do I mean by that? You get it while wearing the red and blue suit, but can only activate one web attack that also works sometimes and doesn't upgrade at all in the entirety of the game. Fantastic. As for the black suit, there's no power-up meter. This meter here fills up to the point where you need to take the suit off through a QTE. You can take it off anytime before filling up the meter and will display a timer showing how long you have before you can switch back. If you don't switch soon enough once the meter fills, you will pass out and respawn a short time later. Alright, time to discuss the black suit, as it's a pretty prominent topic in this installment. This black suit comes from an alien symbiote that binded with Peter one night while he's asleep. In the film, this comes about because he's on the prowl for Flint Marco, his uncle's killer, and falls asleep waiting to hear anything involving him from a police scanner, but doesn't dive into that detail in the game, of course. This black suit makes Spider-Man monumentally stronger than he already is, which is kinda terrifying, considering he can lift and throw a whole ass vehicle in the first movie game. I feel like him being this strong would make his attacks quite lethal. I mean, I feel like even without the black suit, a punch from him would explode a normal human being. With the black suit, I imagine the strength would not only explode someone, but send their body parts flying in several different directions, 10 miles across the city. What a lovely image to implant into people's minds. This living substance also corrupts Peter's personality, due to the symbiote feeding off of him. In the film, it famously turns him into an edgy emo douche, while the game just turns him into an edgy douche. But yeah, the increased strength is displayed in full in the game. Not realistically speaking, of course. Your attacks become noticeably more damaging and aggressive, which would make you think would make combat easier, but that's where you're wrong. It's something I'll touch on later. Access to this suit differs between versions. In the PC version, you unlock it at a certain point in the game, specifically after you've completed a little more than half the story missions, and it stays on until a later point in the game. In contrast, the PS2 version gives you the choice to switch between the two suits, a concept I actually appreciate more. With a tap of a button, you can go from red and blue to black, increasing your health and attack damage at the same time. As mentioned earlier, you have to switch out of the suit once this meter fills up, and get a cooldown before switching back. And no, none of the black suit's abilities can be upgraded in this version. What you get at first is all you get, period. Hey, would you look at that? You can swim now! Yeah! You also have access to Spider Sense, an actual useful mechanic that you can toggle on and off. I somewhat wish this appeared earlier in the series, well, in the way that it does in this game. Naturally, it isn't seen in the PS2 copy, but I guess it's not needed there. Matter of fact, I suppose it's not detrimental to the PC either, but it's a decent enough touch, and if this game needs anything, it needs all the positivity it can get. It helped me find the way when I got lost several times while playing. That's about all I gotta say about the mechanics. We gotta get back to business with the story. Oh yay. We get a story arc involving us working with a detective, DeWolf, to bring in a sizable crew of crooked cops. But she plays the tough chick routine, being reluctant to work with a vigilante. This arc is considerably unremarkable, just consisting of 3 levels having you get photographic evidence of the cops being evildoers and whatnot, followed by beating them into submission with 2 fists of justice. And web attacks. In the last mission, DeWolf here almost gets herself killed, but we save her just in time. Next. After the first photo op mission from earlier involving humanoid-sized lizards, we follow a trail to the lab of Dr. Connors, Peter's college professor at one point or another. As it turns out, to regrow the one arm he lost long ago, Connors whips up a serum based on lizard DNA and injects himself with it. This goes very wrong, as it turns him into a giant lizard thing. Hey, at least his arm grew back. Fun fact, this arc was originally supposed to appear in the previous game, but due to crunch time to get the game out in time, of course, it was cut. Evidence for it can be found in a place or two in the game, and a bit of this was shown off in the E3 2003 trailer as well. Back to it, we follow Connors to the sewers, where many other lizard people inhabit. Hooray, a sewer level. I always found it weird how massive these sewer tunnels were in this game. Is it really like this in real life New York? It might not be, but I don't know for sure. Also, why the hell is there a QTE here? Couldn't I just swing through this tunnel like normal? You know, the same thing I've already done before and for the rest of the level? Whatever. This level ends with a kinda long 2-part boss fight with the lizard. God, I remember trying to play this one with like 10 FPS and mouse and keyboard controls. Those were darker times. Yeah, being a straight console port, this game doesn't have particularly great mouse and keyboard controls. Feeling a bit stiff and clunky, only made worse in combination with the QTEs. It's awful, but the good news is the game natively supports an Xbox controller, which I happen to have one, and it makes the game less painful. That's how I played through the game this time, because fuck trying to tough out the QTEs with keyboard controls and little timing. I don't mean to trail off further, but this game plays just about the same now as it did the day it came out in 2007, which surprised me. I'm used to old games just not working natively on newer OSs, and seeing how this game runs like shit, it surprised me that this one did. At first I thought the copy I downloaded had some patch to it so it could run on Windows 10. But no, I tested a disc copy I had lying around and it ran exactly the same there. So all this jank you've seen so far isn't because it runs more poorly on modern systems, but because the game has always been this janky. And that fact still weirds me out for some reason. Oh, right, back to the game. The lizard is defeated and retreats further into the sewer, but not before he releases more lizards out of the sewers. This is another arc that we'll pick up again later on. For the time being, let's continue with the Mad Bomber. The second mission starts at the Bugle, where the bomber calls Jameson here to threaten him and the entire city. This bomber plans to bomb a subway, so we gotta go stop it. This level's different in the PS2 version, where he threatens to destroy the Bugle's regional office. With this mission, this is where we learn how to disable bombs through QuickTime events, just like real life. I could easily get a job with a bomb squad if disarming bombs were this simple. I like how this Mad Bomber and his squads of goons act completely like Saturday morning cartoon villains, yet are continuously committing domestic terrorism. Despite how they act, shouldn't this alone land them on the FBI's most wanted list? Okay, I know that's asking for too much realism when I know the developers wouldn't go that far, even if they had the time to implement that. This would be of great concern, as this is a 5-mission arc involving this organization bombing many places, or attempting to. First, it's a whole building in parts of the subway, along with a government building, various random locations, and a chemical factory of some kind. That's the point where we learn the backstory of these bombers. Are you prepared? Well, good for you, I guess, but this is underwhelming enough that you don't need to be. As it turns out, the leader, Luke Carlisle, was a businessman of some persuasion. His company was exposed, causing mass pollution by the Bugle, which ruined Carlisle and his company. He exacts revenge by doing a bombing marathon around the city. After being thwarted many a time by Spider Shitkicker, Carlisle finally targets the Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson himself. He bombs a part of the building and kidnaps Jameson, escaping via helicopter, which means we have to give chase. After a bit, a bomb collar is attached to Jameson, and he is dropped right out of the helicopter. We catch him, which usually takes me about 12 years to accomplish, chase the helicopter to a rooftop, and fight the helicopter by repeatedly throwing missiles it launches right back at it. The helicopter is decimated, and Carlisle makes his escape, but remains defeated, for now. And forever, since this game didn't have any sort of continuation, and to my limited knowledge on the comics, I don't think Carlisle was even a character. So story-wise, I don't think we can get anything else to continue his generic arc. At any rate, the level ends with Jameson almost thanking Spider-Man, because of course it would. This whole arc plays out a bit differently and overall is shortened in the PS2 version, kinda like the rest of the game. Bits of this game has a weird duality to it that I have to talk about. I have no choice, it's my destiny. Well, that and eventually dying like any other living thing does at some point in time. Right. Other than the obvious point of Spider-Man's personality shift, this game acts like a cartoon at times, and at the same time has more edge to it than previous games. For example, this game has some language, nothing extreme, stuff like hell and damn, so don't expect any utterances of the words nipples and fart. These few swear words are rarely used too, but it's a step away from the previous games that didn't have any language at all. On top of that, some themes are conceptually a little more adult. Shit, on top of the Mad Bombers wanting to wipe out the entirety of Manhattan, all three street gangs use some form of explosives at one point or another. I know New York is known for its understandably high crime rate, but I don't think the city receives bomb threats on the daily. Well, maybe. And this is coming roughly 6 years after the 9/11 attacks, a period in time when the attack would have still been relatively fresh on people's minds. Or definitely the US government's mind more than anyone else. This sounds a lot like the end times, but is instead just another day in the life of the average New Yorker, I suppose. In the second lizard mission, we see humans getting thrown around and their lizard forms being feasted on by their fellow lizard brethren. You don't see much detail, but damn, you still see a wee bit of their innards and cartoonish green blood. Still, a weird duality, this one. Or remember the mention earlier of Peter killing people? Yeah, he kills a couple of times, as far as I can tell. A later Dragon Tail mission makes you take down a pursuing helicopter by webbing its rotors a few times. The helicopter gives out pretty quick and explodes upon impact with the ground. I don't recall seeing any goons exiting the chopper, so they're likely amongst the burning wreckage of the helicopter now. Forget the ground casualties it possibly caused too. Of course nobody cares about this. Or, I guess to spoil an important bit to another later level, Spidey here tosses Kingpin out of a skyscraper window. That's right, Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime himself, meets his demise by Spider-Man's hand. And Peter, while a little worried about what the black suit is doing to him, seems to brush off the fact that he just murdered. However, as this much realism isn't expected with the game, this issue really isn't addressed again. Yep, this sure is 2007, alright. This duality had me feeling off, and I'm not sure why it makes me feel so off when it's not that huge of a deal. This sort of duality doesn't exist in the PS2 copy, it's all cartoony. Oh boy, next we get another movie bit, Peter's fight with Harry. For the first few minutes of this level, you're stuck on Harry's glider, at first simply dodging his attacks, eventually dodging and scoring some hits yourself. After doing that for a bit, you quick time yourself off the glider and fight him freely. Of note is that this is, like, the only time you can play as normal Peter with his hero abilities legitimately, unless you mod the game and play the entire game as Peter. I haven't extensively tested this, but it seems to work well enough. This level is a bit of a bitch, since Harry's pumpkin bombs and ninja sword are a bit OP, but by the skin of my nuts, I kick his ass and get him to the hospital, like in the movie. In the PS2 copy, this level plays completely different, in the worst possible way. For most of the time, you're hanging off the glider, low to the ground, and dodging cars. Yeah, that's right, dodging fucking cars. Once you go long enough, it'll give you a chance to engage a button combo to get on the glider, but if you're hit by a car, you have to start that combo all over again. Moving quickly along, once the level ends on PC, a cutscene follows, one that I almost failed to capture, that segues into a new arc. Oh yeah, another new one, as if we haven't started a lot of other ones and have abandoned them by this point. It would seem our old friend Scorpion is being held captive by an evil company, Mecha Biocon, and they are experimenting on him. He's looking a bit different from how he looked in the first movie game, but I like this new design, personally. Hell, even if the texture work is dubious on most enemies in the game, their designs themselves look pretty cool, admittedly. Anyway, Scorpion, via mind control, is ordered to break free another old friend of ours, Rhino, from an armored truck. Spidey just so happens to be observing all this unfold, and decides to investigate the shady company. Their base of operations is on an isolated island just off the shore of, Manhattan, I guess. Yeah, that's not suspicious in the slightest. We slingshot there and break in. Be warned, however, as this level contains stealth. Except not really. The game implies sneaking about is required, but being spotted doesn't fail the mission or anything. You just have to fight your way through more guards. Alright, Spider-Man 3, you win this round. We uncover something or another, but we have to make a hasty retreat before the base goes on lockdown, even though no pressure was placed on you before, even if you had been spotted right at the beginning of the level. Either way, we need to get to Scorpion. He's being held at a separate facility back in Manhattan, so we must head that way. Here, to disable part of the security system and get to Scorpion, we gotta go through this very out-of-place minigame, where we play as the Madman himself, taking out guards. I don't think it matters if you die in this minigame, as I think the security system gets disabled either way. We go through a small but highly unnecessary QTE, and reach Scorpion. He begs us to help him, but he's still being controlled, and is ordered to attack us. We beat him up once, causing him to flee from the building into the streets of the city. Obviously, we give chase in a very fast chase sequence. Like, this fucker moves at speeds of what feels like Mach 1. Oh yeah, and your camera stays locked onto him too, so you're going all over the place whenever you're chasing him. It sucks. During a couple different points during the chase, he explodes some cars, causing them to fly up in an attempt to kill us, but we persist through more QTEs. Despite the damage done, we're not forced to even attempt to save the people in said decimated cars, since I guess it's no longer our job. I get we're chasing Scorpion down and time is of the essence, but it seems in this case a bit of collateral damage is worth taking down one dangerous guy for. Oh well. We reach a bridge that's conveniently desolated for this battle only, and atop this bridge are the very transmitters that are taking over Scorpion's brain here. We have to bring his health down so we can overpower him and control his tail that conveniently shoots lasers at the shield generators for the shields protecting the transmitters. We need to do this as many times as it takes. If you're quick enough, you will have to only do this cycle once or twice. But with my early playthroughs of this level, it took me about 3 or 4, even if I made it that far. In the end, thanks to the power of QuickTime events, we cause Scorpion to take out the exposed transmitter, freeing him from his mind captors. He wants to take out the scientist behind his torment, but Spider here advises that we both wait until those bastards least expect it. Scorpion agrees, and he informs us to meet him at his hideout when that time comes. But apparently he's a very impatient person, unsurprisingly. We're not to keep him waiting, which is funny considering this is where we dump this arc for now and won't come back to it until literally the end of the game. Ah, finally, the mission unlocking the black suit is available to play. But we're going to diverge again, like I always do. I gotta squeeze a word in for the music. Before I get into that specific tirade, this video's gone on long enough already, so I'm going to split it up here with an intermission. Yeah, that ought to lose a few people. So yeah, fuck it, intermission time. Hey, here's a fact. This video was originally an interlude talking about the fan remake of Half-Life, Black Mesa. During the production of the Manhunt video, which was the project I'd put the most work into by that point, I wanted to chill out, and I wanted to reflect that in video form as well for the next project I did. Life was still at a weird point for me too, so some relaxing interlude would be something nice and easy to bang out. But I quickly ran into one problem. It wasn't going to be an interesting video. Sure, I plan to do this one while properly unscripted, unlike the second video in the series. Sorry guys, I broke my promise there, if you can even call it a promise. But anyway, I still was having a hard time making it interesting. Then an idea popped into my head. Do the voice work while stoned off my ass. As promising as it sounded, it wasn't meant to work out either, for reasons that I'm sure are obvious. I scrapped that idea and started from scratch, and here we are. This could have been an interlude as well, but I just had too many things to say. And now, children, you are enlightened. Okay, that's about all for today's intermission. I hope you enjoyed it. Alright, back to it. In a lot of Spider-Man games, the music is typically symphony orchestra stuff, with various bits of other things occasionally sprinkled in, and the third movie game is kinda all over the place actually. You see, just looking at the movie games, the first one was almost exclusively generic orchestra crap, with not much memorable except for maybe the menu music. The second game is half orchestra, half industrial, and I gotta admit, I'm a sucker for industrial music in games, and it hits with this one. The orchestra stuff is pretty on par with the first game. Maybe just a little better though. Of course, the developers for these games were never going to obtain licenses to use the wonderful scores from the movies, composed by Danny Elfman and, to a lesser extent, Christopher Young. So they had to come up with something fitting enough. Hey, you guys remember that time Danny Elfman was in Oingo Boingo? Yeah, that's really fucking weird to think about. You got your usual business of a traditional score that typically plays during free roam. Although, on occasion, it'll be spiced up a bit with a dash of electronic, so that's not bad. Each gang has their own accompanying theme when fighting them, both during and outside of missions. For example, the Apocalypse has a punk-sounding theme, naturally. The Dragon Tale's mostly electronic, with bits of traditional sounding Asian music, if that makes sense. I'm not 100% on how to categorize it. Then, Arsenic Candy probably has one of my favorite themes from this game. Bear with me, as I'm no professional in the field of music, or audio for that matter, but I'm going to say it's a bit of pop-punk flavor here. If I'm wrong, please, for the love of all things holy, abuse me in the comments. You know you want to. I wouldn't blame you. Whatever it is, it's good, that's all I know. The start screen music on the PS2 version is freaky as hell. I don't even know how to categorize it in a remotely accurate manner. Maybe a hint of Darkwave? That's a shame, since the PS2 copy doesn't really have as much of a variation. Well, at least it has this theme. Actually, once you get a hold of the black suit, the themes start to become a little more metal and warped. Like this one is now a metal version of a track that plays during free roam. The one for MJ's scare ride is, I'm sure, an accurate representation of how the symbiote is affecting Peter by this point. But the important part is that it is solid. interesting tidbit to point out is that digging through the game files reveals that there was a track used for an instance involving Black Cat, who isn't in the final game at all. It shows that the file was updated in January of 2007, 4 months before release, while in comparison, all other soundtrack files I could find were modified at the end of March the same year. Considering that, her soundtrack bit seemed to only be a placeholder, because as far as I can tell, the track is from Spider-Man 2, the film, which I can't play here for obvious reasons. You can find this track on YouTube when looking up the soundtrack for this game. I'll link it in the description. Point is, previously, Black Cat appeared in the previous movie game. Oh yeah, that's a hard one to forget. And I never knew she was supposed to be in this game as well, though it would have made sense. Since I can't really do a thorough dig into the game files for any leftovers, I did some searching online and couldn't come up with anything related. At this point, who knows where she came in during the development process. I'm going to take an educated guess and say that her inclusion was a late stage idea, but was scrapped not long afterwards because there wasn't time to implement an arc including her. I mean, this game was clearly rushed, and I don't know how long it took to develop the game in a general sense. Her arc was probably going to be another filler one, assuming she had an arc of her own and not attached to someone else's. If any developers of the game want to give me some answers, you can get in touch with me at the provided email address. Or I suppose just comment below for everybody to see. If you do so, maybe I'll consider hating your game less. Maybe. I'm sorry, I trailed off while trailing off again. The original point is, this game's soundtrack has an interesting range to it, with the worst being just forgettable, and the best being some legitimately good score work. I definitely approve of this, and I kind of forget how good it was. Objectively, I think this one has the best score of any Spider-Man game, and that's saying something. Thanks, Tobias Enhus. Much appreciated. I hope I pronounced that right. Time to get our grubby hands on the black suit. It's about goddamn time, and the timing couldn't have been better. We get to test it out on good old Flint Marko, who's now Sandman. He's taking off with a duffel bag of cash into the subway, so kids, we take it upon ourselves to deliver some brutal justice his way. Unless it's the PS2 version. We beat up some generic apocalypse goons, as I guess Marko is a later objective. Back on track. Fuck, that was a pun. I'm so sorry, everybody. We beat him up, along with pushing his head into an oncoming train, which would annihilate his head if he were still a normal human being. But he is a man of the sand, so it just pisses him off. We continuously knock him down lower and lower into the subway system, eventually reaching a sewer system. Grabbing onto a huge pipe that may or may not contain shit and piss water, we rip it open so it floods the ground Sandman is standing on, and as a result, melts him away. This is probably the one of the few levels in the game that's reasonably accurate to how it played out on the big screen, which is a weird thing to say for a movie game. It's probably one of my favorite levels in the entire game, which there's not many of. Gee, who would have guessed that last part? I'll tell you who. Anybody who's still trying to wrap their head around why I like this game. It's okay, I'm right there with you. A cutscene immediately follows the conclusion of the level. Kraven the Hunter and Calypso stand atop a rooftop, with Kraven vowing to hunt down Spider-Man, with Calypso reminding him that the pair's primary target is the Lizard. This is the first appearance of Kraven in the movie games, but why do I bring this up specifically, other than to be precise? Well, because it's not. This is technically his second time. Confused yet? Allow me to elaborate for the uninformed. In the first movie game, a vast majority of the consoles it came out on used the same version, from GameCube to PS2 to Xbox and to PC. The only difference was it wasn't designed with keyboard controls in mind for the PC, so that port is shit for that. But wait, the Xbox version had 2 levels exclusive to that version that had Kraven being hired by Norman Osborn to lure and trap Spider-Man. This is achieved, and Peter falls into a trap at the zoo, having to avoid sudden death at every turn. I haven't played these extensively as they were really goddamn challenging, but it's still stupid that these 2 levels only released on the Xbox. Console exclusivity can sometimes confuse and frustrate me, at least in circumstances such as this case. These levels didn't even appear in the PC version, which could have easily happened considering Microsoft is the pissing driving force behind both platforms. Fucking hell, this is what my life is lately. Bitching about matters that had as little meaning in the first place as it does in the long run. Or now. Whatever makes me think less about how bleak reality is and always will be. From here, we can resume many of the arcs we nearly abandoned in the first half of the game, and from here, the game's difficulty takes a noticeable hike up. Not that the game was the easiest thing to play before, but it starts getting hard as nails from this point on. Anyway, first things first, let's dish out this lizard arc again. We return to the place in the sewers we left off at, and travel much deeper and deeper into the sewer system. After some time, we finally reach Craven and fight him, but he's attempting to even the playing field. He has these vials of elixirs that he can whip out and smash on the ground at certain times to give him enhanced abilities. These abilities range from making multiple copies of himself to partially morphing himself into different animals. All this thanks to Calypso, a character I'm still only vaguely familiar with. He has 2 phases, with the second phase giving him the ability to turn invisible, making us use the damn spider sense to barely see him, all while groups of lizards keep trying to jump us. Thank Christ I can cheese Craven with these finishing moves, otherwise this level would have taken me longer. The first time or two I played this level in my life, it was a considerable pain in the dick. The PS2 copy, though, is way more simplified, and thus a million times more painless. However, it has the fatal side effect of making the level a dull one. Once again, I guess we just can't win. This version also contains just 1 section to play, and that's it. The next lizard level is triggered separately and can be started at any time, but the PC version makes this all just one long, boss-filled offering. It takes place now in a big generator room directly next to the subway tunnels. Through magical powers from Calypso, or another dosage of the serum in the PS2 copy because Calypso doesn't exist in this version of the game, Connors is now not just a lizard, but a mega lizard. Bleh. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This sucks. When I got the footage for this level, I completely forgot how to beat him. I mean, I knew I needed to throw him into the generators because he's protected by a bright blue shield, but how to reach that point was initially lost on me. It took me exactly 3 solid minutes of guessing before I guessed doing a web attack, which leads to stunning him and being able to grab him by the tail, swinging him around to chuck him into the generators. God, this level is painfully fickle. Let's just skip to the part where I repeat this process 3 other times, only 4 short minutes later. We can now beat his head in, although he won't stop spamming me with this damn ground slam attack, which the camera locks onto every time he engages this move. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, missing from the previous 2 games is a button to toggle lock on. Yep. But wait, how's this looking on the PS2 version anyway? Oh, it's somehow worse, even if it's just one level that just consists of a single boss fight that's set up pretty similarly in overall design as the other version. At first, the big bastard loops through his attack moves, eventually determined to charge you. So, if you have basic problem-solving skills, you can put 2 and 2 together here. Move out of the way so he can crash right into the generators, and you do this for the first 2 generators. But that sounds way simpler than how it's done in the other version. What the hell are you talking about? Shut up, metaphorically alternate me. I'm getting to that. After that, the big guy learns his lesson and stops charging the spider, sticking to just close quarters attacks. That is when he's not trying to rapidly close the gap if you run away from him. What's our solution to this pickle we find ourselves in? Welp, at a particular moment when he attacks a certain way that doesn't give us the biggest margin of error in terms of time taken, We engage him in a drawn-out quick time event. This stuns him and we have to forcibly ride him like a bull. It wouldn't be a big problem, except we're provided with a bar that shows how balanced we are while steering him that we can only maintain by keeping a finger on the left analog stick. And the balance has a tendency to jerk suddenly to the left or to the right, throwing us off balance and kicking us off the mega fucker. Once we get used to how to balance it out, we have to steer him right into one of the two remaining generators, but he can only crash into them when it prompts you to push another button at another particular time with precise timing. If you fail all of this, you have to wait for him to do that certain attack that triggers the long-ass QTE and gets you to ride him all over again. I might be exaggerating my anger a bit, but holy hell, this very part left a stain on my soul. There's not many games that have levels that have done that to me in my life. The only couple other ones that can instantly come to mind are playing the last chapter from Max Payne 3 on hardcore difficulty, and map 11 in the Doom 2 expansion, the Plutonia Experiment, where the map is fittingly called Hunted. That latter one is the first level of any game to have made me physically ill just from playing it long enough. It properly wrecked me 6 months to Sunday. Fuck, I've got my eye off the ball again. While not as bad as the latter example, I can't begin to remember how long it took me to tough out this cocksucker of a level as a kid. It makes my bones itch just thinking about it, and it does the same thing every time I try to play through this fucking level. Back to the somewhat less painful version. We whittle down his health like normal, QTE his ass through the wall and onto the subway tracks. This results in him being electrified on the rails, somehow turning him back into human. Okay, first off, Dr. Connors is still wearing his human clothes, fully intact, despite them being stretched and torn after his first transformation, with them disappearing altogether with his second transformation. And secondly, although he was pumped full of super lizard steroids, not just any regular lizard steroids, super lizard steroids. Don't get it confused. That should have already made his heart explode. That much electricity shocking him back into human form should have fried him completely, but instead makes a full recovery eventually. During all this though, Peter is indeed concerned about Dr. Connor's condition, but he's seemingly more concerned about how the black suit is turning him into a raging lunatic, the selfish prick. The level ends with Connors now in the hospital, and we're back on patrol in the city. Okay, I need to segue into another topic while I'm at it, the map. If you didn't already know, most Spider-Man related things take place in New York City, with games specifically taking place in and around Manhattan. Since the game started going free roam, Manhattan is the most fleshed out portion, with some other areas like Queens usually being the only other fleshed out area. Most times, places like Liberty Island are hard to reach or just off limits altogether, while everything else around is blocked off by invisible walls. Oh god, these games love their invisible walls, especially 2, and this game is no different. Worst of all is the areas rendered beyond what's accessible. They hardly even exist at all. In this game especially, these areas look like complete shit and can be seen pretty easily without having to get a close look. But you certainly can with a simple glitch here. You know how the GTA games have a tendency to not render any additional islands beyond the main ones, and instead makes the rest of the map an endless ocean? It sure isn't the most realistic, but Spider-Man 3 is the reason why they don't. Hell, that looks awful. Well, are the accessible areas as bad? Surprisingly, they're pretty decent, if you've caught on to it from watching this video by now. If you are still watching. One problem I have with Spider-Man 2 is how low quality and basic everything looks. Most NPCs look vaguely human, and a lot of Manhattan looks the same. The buildings specifically look generic. Most of them are just modeled as basic rectangles, textured with basic flat textures, and with very little variety overall. The only ones that stand out only do so because that building is needed for a later mission, and thus look like they do for that purpose only. And some famous landmarks are rendered as you'd expect them, but overall the map to the game is kinda shite. I've never liked it. The map decoration is pretty small, and among the Skinwalker NPCs is traffic, which is as basic as the rest of it. The most variety appears in the form of either taxis or pickup trucks. This game really isn't a winner visually. It's fun enough to play though. I mentioned the NPCs earlier as not being good here either, which hasn't changed. I mean, the game in general just looks worse on the PS2 version, or I guess in this case the PSP version, even just comparing it to Spider-Man 2. It isn't all bad surprisingly, as the buildings and Manhattan as a whole is looking a lot better. The map itself seems more accurately modeled than before. Manhattan feels more like Manhattan. Times Square feels more like Times Square, even if it still isn't great. And Grand Central Station, well, you get the idea. Though Grand Central seems to have gotten shinier since it appeared in the first game. That's the future, I guess. Anyhow, the buildings include way more variety in terms of modeling and texturing. Sure, some mission locations still stand out, but not as obviously as they do in 2. The buildings look and feel more realistic. Well, kinda. They start to look a little awful when viewing the ones in the distance, which is a shame since they look kinda solid up close. The map decoration and traffic, though, has improved well enough for the time. Overall, it still isn't the best map, but in comparison to what came before it, it'll do the job nicely. I've never been to Manhattan, or New York City for that matter, nor am I familiar with the area, but I'd say it feels more like it here than it does in 2, or even Ultimate Spider-Man. I'd say it wouldn't get better until the 2018 Spider-Man game, though that game is just better in general, but that's another topic. We need to get back on course. I keep going off topic, but no matter how much I lament on that, I'm still going to do it. If it means anything, I kinda have a tendency to do this in normal conversation as well, so it all cancels out, right? Another arc down, what have we got now? Hey, look at that, I can finally finish the crap Dragon Tail arc. Ah shit, we have to end the arc off on a bastard of a level, of course. First, we gotta chase a gang van and disable it, but look out, there's a chopper on your tail, and you have to take it down by repeatedly webbing up the rotors. Yeah, this is that one level I was talking about earlier. Skipping ahead, we kill some people and stop the car, and now we have to return to the warehouse where the van came from. We arrive and have to follow a police helicopter to the Dragon Tail's hideout. Thankfully, it doesn't take long to get there, and we decide to drop in on the party the Dragon Tails happen to be having. We kick ass through one group of roughly a dozen generic goons, only to be met with 4 swordsmen. Way more strong and aggressive than the generic guys. These guys always wreck my flow when I play this level. Shit. Those guys get taken care of and we're met with a boss because why wouldn't we be? Well, at least the game gives you a health pickup just as the boss begins, so that's not too bad. Those 4 guys, though, are typically the only ones that give me trouble, no matter how many times I fly through this game. This level will always stump me because of those bastards. That's enough of that. I have a quick thing to say about the health and health pickups real quick. To a certain degree, I don't know how these work, and neither does the game, really. Usually, the pickups restore your health to max health, except when they don't. But this only seems to happen with the pickups that spawn in the middle of a mission. Otherwise, like at the end of missions, these do restore your full health, but it really doesn't need to. Yeah, the game automatically heals you when you complete a story mission anyway, but it still gives you a health pickup in the end. I just don't get it, but sure. The PS2 version has it to where all health pickups heal you fully every time. They spawn at the end of missions without the game healing you too, and they appear on top of ambulances. That last part in itself wouldn't be weird, except ambulances are very common in traffic, which is weird. Well, I guess this is New York after all. With the millions of people in the city, I guess there's a lot of people getting hurt at one time, maybe? I don't know. To say this game is wonky is an understatement, and we only keep finding evidence to support that. I don't even need to tell you that. I mean, just look at the friggin' game. Before I get too off base again, we've got a story to smash out, if you can call it a story when it's just a bunch of story arcs thrown together to make up a story so the developers wouldn't have to figure out any other way to pad out the story. Because the movie's story alone wasn't going to come close to pulling that off. We've got another date with the arsenic candy, this time at a museum, for some reason. You know the drill. Plus, I wasn't listening to the few story details there are to be had. We stop them, just barely, from wrecking some fossils, only to find a note the group had left behind. It's an invitation for Spider Dick here. An invitation to the wedding of the gang's boss. Now that sounds like a wedding that needs to be crashed, and this isn't my first either. Or perhaps it is. I don't know. I don't keep track of this crap. Ah yes, what a lovely looking wedding. What, with the dilapidated abandoned church and the goth girl gang being the only guests? Hell, one of them is playing the church organ over there. And the groom himself is there against his will. Ah, young love. Welp, we gotta go about business as usual and do us some ass kicking. Along with relocating the groom to different parts of the church to get him off the candy's back, even though they could just follow us. Fine, if the game tells me it's going to be okay, then I guess it's okay. But let's not get too distracted, as where in the world is the lady of the hour anyway? There she be. Must have been getting ready for her respective ass kicking. She puts up a worthy fight, but the symbiote wins every time, especially against mere mortals, without somehow obliterating said mortals. Now's the time to get a head count. Earlier on, we took down the Apocalypse like the bunch of pussies they are, the Dragon Tails were a constant pain in the dick all the way through, and the Arsenic Candy are now down for the count as well. We've got a new mission at the Bugle, which revolves around a press conference concerning the 3 gang bosses we took down. We head down to the courthouse, where this conference is taking place, to get some pictures. We get what we came for, but notice that the Kingpin is in attendance and up to no good. As one would guess, he's there with all 3 gangs assembled to help break free the bosses. We fight away various goons from all gangs, but Fisk and the bosses are long gone, which seems to only further anger Peter more than it already did. Looks like we have a meeting to attend with Kingpin, so we make our way to his penthouse. Upon making our own entrance in, we encounter several goons, which we easily plow through. That puts us up with the big guy himself, which is probably the most tedious boss fight in the game, which says something. And it's only one of 2 times we fight him. While this game gets frustrating, particularly after the midpoint, it's mostly because it's hard and unbelievably buggy, although here, it's all down to the fight being pure tedium. When I first tried to play this level back in the day, I couldn't figure out how to get through to this fat fuck. When it's really down to a simple pattern. Dodge his attacks, counterattack only once afterwards, as he'll simply block more than one counterattack at a time, or even just attack for that matter. Once you do that enough, your rage meter will fill up. Activate it immediately to deliver the beating onto him, since he can't block most of your attacks in that state. Once the rage is out, you're back at step 1, rinse and repeat. Before, all bosses had a similar pattern, though you can punch through their blocks a fair amount, whereas here, the game is making you wait, the fuckers. Nearly 4 minutes of this shit later, he puts us head to head with the 3 gang bosses, together. Surprisingly, this fight isn't nearly as bad as it sounds, even if these knob gobblers cornered me and nearly wrecked me during recording. My saving grace here was that the mission is generous enough to drop in a health pickup the second one of those bosses drop, which really saved my ass. That and cheesing the finishing moves. God, this level is fucking long though. We're back facing Fisk again, and it's literally the same thing the second time around. I'll spare you guys, but let me tell you, this isn't fun. Another nearly 4 minutes later, this one ends off with a QTE that I somehow don't fuck up, and we toss this asshole out the window. And Peter here takes it pretty well, considering he's not really in the killing business. He shrugs it off and decides he's done here. Okay, hold up just a moment. Forget that Maguire's voice performance here, and frankly all 3 of these games, exemplifies that old Toby was there just for the paycheck. Granted, it's not David Duchovny in 13 bad.
I can't remember a thing. Ow, my head.
Sir?
This is not good.
But his voice performance has always been so subpar, and his acting in front of a camera is, well, it's better, but not by a huge margin, specifically in the films these games are tied to. Anyway, no, forget that for a second and let the realization sink in. The realization that Spider-Man just killed the fucking kingpin of crime, a man of great importance. It bothers me that Peter killed an important figure in the world of organized crime and doesn't seem to be all that worried about it. Wouldn't doing this make Spider-Man the most wanted man, as far as organized crime is concerned, across the eastern seaboard? I don't truly know how far Kingpin's power reaches, but I'm sure it's far enough that people would be tracking Spider-Man constantly, to the point where they would inevitably uncover his secret identity. Him and everybody close to him would be well and truly boned. Even Harry's fortune or newfound powers cannot dig him out of this grave. Look, I know I'm asking too much from a Saturday morning cartoon story, but for fuck's sake, if the writers for the game are going to write such a thing and throw in some edge here and there, they gotta deliver on the edginess. That's not the case though, so off we go. How about we take another breather for a moment and check up on our old friend, the PS2 version of this game. Although I wouldn't call it a friend. A version of the game that doesn't contain half the story arcs of the PC version. The gangs, the Kingpin, the DeWolf, all among those absent from the PS2 copy. I guess for a bit of compensation, we get an arc centered around Morbius. Yeah, that Morbius, the one from that movie that had all the memes, the movie that had the titular character played by a guy who ruins every movie he touches. I never saw the movie myself, all because Jared Leto is in it, but long before that movie was even a concept, I was first exposed to this character through this version of the game. Later on in the game, reports start cropping up that there's an actual vampire, going around doing the vampire thing of sucking blood out of the living, an action we never see firsthand, of course. In the middle of studying the symbiote at Connor's lab, we're tasked with taking down and getting pics of this vampire. We do so and bring him back to Connor's. The good professor informs Peter that the vampire is Michael Morbius, a fellow professor who seems to have been infected by the very same symbiote that currently inhabits Peter's body. During this string of missions, we encounter the Waste Tribe, the replacement gang for the arsenic candy in this version. This gang is more of a weird-ass cult, and it turns out they are a cult worshipping Shriek, another vampire-like being, I think, and no less wife to Dr. Morbius. She was the first one exposed to the symbiote and proceeded to infect her husband with the addicting substance. Anyway, we find her wreaking havoc across town with the tribe, something we must put a stop to. We do so by taking down her monolith thing? I'm lost on that part. She runs off and we have no clue where she ran off to, so we gotta find her one way or another. Actually, it's just one way, and that way is doing a whole bunch of combat tours against the Waste Tribe. Boring. Let's skip to a part where something notable happens. Once we get done with enough combat tours, we discover her hideout, and we have to take Morbius there. As it turns out, we need to get the both of them cured. We arrive, and Shriek immediately turns her husband on us again, but he's a vampire, and vampire rules still apply here. We stun him with sunlight and get him out of the equation, though we have to fight his wife now. She's powerful, using her ability with the symbiote to affect our connection to the symbiote and play mind games with us. She can play mind games all she wants, but we've got spider abilities on our side, so, you know, we kick ass. The lovely couple are defeated, and a way is established to get them cured. Hooray! Happy ending. This arc was actually a little more interesting than most of the arcs found in either version. I mean, it's still rough, don't get me wrong there, but a little bit of an improvement. Both versions of the game are fucking weird, and despite playing both versions quite extensively, I can't say for certain which version is superior. Both are rushed products made in tandem by different studios. housing huge similarities and noteworthy differences all at the same time. Both look like shit, both play like shit, though the PS2 version is more simple and forgiving in that sense, which makes it way more repetitive, as if it weren't already so in spades. The PS2 version also has way less filler, thus making the game seem like it actually has a story to it, which it kinda does. The consequence of this, though, is that the game is shortened down considerably. The PC version isn't really long either. Even with taking my time to upgrade my abilities to a point, the game still took me only 9 hours to get through. Once you go through the story, you get the option to play it again with the black suit. That playthrough only took me 5. Since that acts as kind of a new game plus, you could say, I didn't really need to upgrade my abilities even further than where they were already at, so that's why it took me so quick. With the amount of filler story halved on the PS2, I'm sure a playthrough would only take 2 to 3 hours. Then again, these games have never been long. 2 takes about a few hours as well, and I know that one for a fact. Point is, I hate the fact that the 2 versions are so radically different while trying to be the same damn thing. I know, different companies and whatnot, but it's still too jarring not to say something. Star Wars The Force Unleashed came out a year later and did the same thing, sorta. Albeit that one was a massive multimedia project that wasn't tied to any movie from the franchise. On top of that, the differing versions of the game aren't as radically different. Still different, but to a much lesser extent. I don't know, this is a subject that's always bothered me, even as a kid. I don't know how many other games that do this, but I'd like to dive into it at some point. Maybe I'll do a video on it someday, who knows? For now though, we don't have much story left, I promise. Oh, I guess this game has ports for the Nintendo DS and Game Boy Advance, but I'm not familiar with either of those, hence why I haven't brought them up. Moving right along. Time to finish this story off. You know, the story that was hastily taped together. And not with nice durable tape either, but scotch tape. And it was all lit on fire too, to add insult to injury. It's all a mess. We've got a date with MJ, but Peter is pissy about something. I don't know, it all has to do with angst or something. You know how it is. This upsets MJ, understandably, and she requests to be taken home. It's the same crap we've dealt with before, with a minor change. In the thrill rides before, MJ would constantly have us do something between each checkpoint, such as swing fast, but here...
I didn't want to go this way.
That's ominous. Is this a threat? We finally arrive outside her apartment, but not before Peter gets aggressive with her again, which prompts her to state that the two of them should spend some time apart. At long fucking last, roughly 10 missions after first acquiring the black suit and a few counts of murder later, Peter goes to the nearby church to shed the suit, with a curious Eddie Brock tailing us for one reason or another. He enters the church after this and... you get the point. No more symbiote Spider-Man, but now we have Venom, who gets less screen time here than he does in the movie, which is really saying something. Now that we're back in the old red and blues, Peter is back in a good state of mind. But more importantly, we can finally tie up some loose ends concerning the story. Like stated earlier on, if you haven't played through the missions for the Bugle, you're gonna have to bust them out before you can access the last mission. I put great emphasis on this because in my first playthrough, I thought these missions were mostly optional. Kinda like how it was a side mission in 2, and only found out they were required due to me being locked out of the final level. That wasn't fun at all to deal with. Back to it, although Dr. Connors is back to normal, the same cannot be said about many others who still remain in their reptile state. Connors, with our assistance of course, takes the initiative to cure these poor bastards. The first part of the plan is to gather some serum left in the sewers in a lab that was built by Connors while he was a lizard or something. I don't know, the serum is a key element to reverting these reptiles. This wasn't all that hard or long, though this was the only time during both playthroughs that the game crashed on me. Shit, I figured it would have crashed more, but knowing my luck, it obviously crashed just as the last cutscene started playing. meaning I had to play that level all over again. Well, at least the game didn't corrupt my save this time. Even then, I had my save backed up, so there was no way that was happening. Not again. We'd be done here if that save was fucked, but we're almost done anyway. It's all good. Next step, go back to the sewers and insert the 3 serums we collected into their own dispensers that will emit vapor to transform anyone who is a lizard back into a human. Ah, great, sewer time again already. To make matters worse, this level reuses some sections from the first sewer level. Oh yeah, and this level is a pain in the ass. Once you drop a vial into a dispenser, you start getting fucking swarmed by lizards. Sure, they're noticeably weaker than usual for balance reasons, but at the same time, the dispensers are ridiculously weak. Even just one hit can bring down a quarter of its health, if not more, from any one of these bastards. How about we keep the shit going? Each one has a timer that counts down until the serum takes its effect, with the first one being only 30 seconds. While the last 10 seconds gives you a freebie and turns any remaining lizards back into humans, it still sucks, considering that the second and third dispensers take longer, with the last one taking a whole 2 minutes. Now that doesn't sound like long, but keep in mind that you've got dozens of lizards trying to jump you and take out that dispenser. Fuck this level, it can go in the garbage. Thank fuck it's the end of the arc. Last arc up before the end is Scorpion's arc. He's been waiting for us for a minute, better not keep him waiting another second. We meet him at his hideout and he leads us through a metro tunnel that belongs to Mecha Biocon. A tunnel that's as big as the subways in this game. Yeah, I bet no one ever questioned that. It doesn't seem all that hard to find either, making me wonder how many homeless people wandered down here. I think about it, these games really never show homeless people. Guess they just don't exist in this universe. Right, back to the matter at hand. We reach the end of the tunnel only to emerge into the facility itself. We proceed through the place, dodging some sort of security measure at every turn. Eventually, with the help of Scorpion, we face off with Rhino, but Scorp here is not invincible. He can die. Until he isn't dead. Well, the game doesn't fail when he dies, so I don't know what to say. The fight itself isn't all that bad, we probably didn't need the assistance on this one. After that, some things with these 2 scientists happen, and, hey, the last level! Let's fucking do this. Before then, we are treated to a cutscene of Brock forcing Flint Marco to work with him to kill that damned spider.
That damn spider, huh?
In essence, it all plays out pretty similarly to the movie, with some noticeable differences. At a construction site, MJ is being held captive by Venom and Sandman, and Peter needs to be the hero, as per usual. We arrive at the site, first fighting it out with Eddie with the usual boss fight pattern, plus an extra step. Nothing really too distressing as far as this game goes, but hold on, we've got something else in the mix. During the fighting, a cutscene plays, showing Harry watching the newscast of the fight and just decides to help his friends. Remember earlier when I talked about the game glossing over details from the movie? The game sure doesn't. Yep, we get to play as New Goblin, and it sucks. The controls are clunky and slow, just overall not practical. We get a short tutorial from Bruce one last time on how to play this character the one and only time you do get to play him. Unless you have a DLC for the console version or have modded the game on PC, where you have the option to play as him anytime during free roam, but not during missions. It's the most bare bones thing in the world, as you can't really do anything in it. Outside of stopping crimes, there's really nothing else to do except blast yourself into the stratosphere on the glider. Can't even get off the glider. I'm not trying to compare it to playing as the Green Goblin in the first game, this just sucks on its own. So yeah, one of the most pointless additions to a game I've ever seen. As one would expect, you can't play as him in the PS2 version, because the developers hate you and your family. Or maybe they're trying to spare you from how fucking dull he is to play. Back to it, we haul ass to the site only to be faced with Mega Sandman. Oh, fuck this one. I don't want to do this fight. Immediately, we find that our already fickle as hell pumpkin bombs aren't doing too much damage. So we gotta get him wet from a spewing hydrant, which does indeed work, but our pumpkin bombs still suck. God, this one always feels like it goes on forever. All due to your movement being very limited in your one attack type, ranged attacks aren't very effective in combat. To top it all off, fucking hell, the QTEs. Don't worry, I didn't forget to come back to this. Like I said, the game is impatient as all hell when it comes to these points, and it gets harder as the game goes along too. The button combinations get longer and require more buttons in sequence than before. I mean, sometimes the game isn't an asshole about these, but this boss fight here is the prime example of when QTEs are absolute shitbaggers. I'm going to break it down for you guys. Once you spend at least nearly 15 fucking minutes trying to get this big bastard's health down, you have this quick time event that requires so inhumanly precise timing. It's a long combo, and it goes by real quick, so if you're even a nanosecond off, bam, dead, start over. This level is pain, and will always be pain, even after having completed this version of the game 4 times in my wasted life. The PS2 copy is more merciful in this regard. It slows down the game while doing them to give you enough time to react, and the button combos don't get nearly as long or complicated. This level isn't as painful on the PS2, but it's definitely more tedious. The same can be said about, well, the entire game in general. You've got 4 sections in total, starting at fighting Sandman at normal size, following the same boss fight patterns as before. Next, Venom and these same patterns, only a bit more shitty. Third up, Giant Sandman and more QTEs that aren't nearly as painful but still tedious. Then, a second fight with Venom that's all the same. Bleh, let's wrap this up. Back to the PC, we blow up Sandman and zoom in to help Peter. Then I guess Venom just launches Harry into the Shadow Realm. Okay. This fight doesn't last long. It's the same pattern as the first part of the fight. The end QTEs for this fight are a bit of a bitch too, but are a bit more manageable. And it ends off with Venom falling into a stack of upright poles, going right through him. God damn, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, he wasn't blown up like he was in the movie, but it's still kinda metal that we got to see him die like that in a game like this. We'll call this one self-defense for the body count, though. This wasn't murder. The PS2 version is fucking lame when it comes to this part, though. Anyway, for the final cutscene, MJ is rescued and reconciles with Peter. However, Sandman reappears to wreck their shit. Just before that happens, the police pop up with Marco's daughter and they embrace. Okay, I'm just saying, but isn't Flint here an escaped convict? Isn't this cop right here going to do anything about that? No? Alright, whatever, we're done here anyway. For the last bit, Peter recites the whole with great power line while doing a final swing through the city, and roll credits. That's the game. You guys still with me? I mean, I'm sure I lost a few people, but good for you guys for still hanging on. I'm sorry though, I really didn't intend for this video to stretch out this long, but this was a case of me wanting to be as thorough as possible. Like I've stated in the beginning, I have quite a history with this game, and not necessarily out of nostalgia either. It just shows that no matter where I go in life, no matter what I end up doing years down the line, some things in life just never change. This game will always remain a part of my life that I will occasionally revisit, for better or for worse. that's probably the most realistic thing I can say when talking about my feelings about this game. While these movie games aren't known for being polished, this game is broken on all ends. But I think I keep a liking for it because I see the potential this game has. It feels mostly unfinished, but some of the foundation has something good there. I don't know, I guess I just like the variety. This game throws a lot of crazy crap at you, and not all of it lands, but when it does, it has my respect. Honestly, if this game had spent an additional 6 months to a year in development, polishing it up and making things feel more playable, and look better for that matter, it could have been something good. Sure, likely not great, but I can deal with just good. If this game had more modability, as the source code for the game was never released, I feel some actual upgrading could be possible. Hell, the PSP version's more moddable it seems, albeit it just seems to be skins, nothing too special. That's the same case on PC I guess, with the exception of the New Goblin mod, or the mod that allows you to play as Peter in normal gameplay. So yeah, another skin I suppose. In the end, despite my liking for it, I won't argue against people calling this game a piece of shit, because it is. It doesn't play right, and it looks kinda ugly, even for the time it came out. I remember thinking as a wee lad that this game looked like the best thing to ever grace the existence of humans, but I was wrong. I do have some fun playing it, surprisingly, at certain points. It sucks that it's probably not going to come out of obscurity, but it's understandable. Plus, I'm just thankful that it is preserved, so future generations can live through the pain as well. Although this episode took a while to churn out, it was an interesting experience revisiting this game for the first time since my teen years. I don't know when I'll come back to it, but the time will come. Eventually. One day. And now the world can know what one guy thinks of it, assuming anyone sat through the entirety of this presentation. That's it. For those who stuck around this long, I love you for sticking around this long. Even if my audience isn't too big, I still love all you guys. That's it for this episode. I'll see ya in the next one. I don't even know what the next one's going to be next. Hopefully something shorter. Some edibles, some black mesa. Yeah, this should be fun, alright. I cannot wait. 5 minutes later. Oh no, oh, what the hell is going on here? Is this Black Mesa? I don't remember any of this shit. What the fuck? What's going on? Man, I gotta stop getting high and playing video games. It's doing some freaky shit to me now. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening?